Hello and welcome to Keylingo Live. My name is Frederick Marks and I'm your host today. Thank you so much for joining us for the latest edition of the show, where we're going to discuss business topics, interview experts, and engage our online community. On this show, we like to invite guests that have something to share. They've got interesting stories, and generally, they just like to have fun. If this is your first time or you've joined us on previous episodes, we're happy you're here. There's really something for everyone here, and we're always happy to provide a platform for any professional with ideas and insights worth sharing. Please let us know if there's a topic that you'd like us to cover or a guest that you'd like us to invite to a future episode. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to Keylingo, follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube, so you'll always be in the know when we publish future episodes or cover a topic that's of particular interest to you. Now, before we dive into today's topic, please remember that we'd love to hear from you both during and after today's episode. We want you to send us comments, let us know where you are in the world, and don't hesitate to provide feedback as the show progresses. Today's episode is special because we're starting a new series called Lessons from Leaders. I can't tell you how excited I am to start this new series. And in this series, we've got the privilege of hosting accomplished leaders that will join me in a conversation and share invaluable wisdom. And we'll dive into the stories that shape their success. We'll uncover lessons that they've gathered along the way. And you're definitely going to gain some unique insights into the driving forces behind their achievements. Among my goals today will be to get a glimpse also into the human side of these exceptional individuals, while offering the audience an engaging and fun conversation with plenty of valuable takeaways. Now, we also want to engage our audience directly. So before I introduce our guest, we'd like to ask everyone watching today to share their thoughts on leadership. Remember that this episode and this series is about lessons from leaders. And we know that there's a lot of leaders in the audience. So if you would, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen and answer the question. And we'll refer to the answers later in the show. Now, on to our guest. Many of you know her, and many of you are meeting her for the first time. Regardless, everybody's going to learn something new today. On our show today, we've got Sophie Halbenstein. And Sophie, and while I'm introducing her, please be sure to answer that question that you got from the QR code. And you may have seen Sophie or met her at a conference in our industry, or you may have seen her online. She earned her master's degree in international finance, but you won't see her on any trading floor. Her early career actually started at Subway Corporate. I think we're going to find out whether or not she made a sub in her career or not, but she worked for Subway Corporate. And Sophie brings a lot of interesting stories that she brings from that experience. And since her time at Subway, she's held a lot of different positions, honing her considerable expertise in B2B sales, marketing, and consulting. Sophie's got an empathetic approach to sales and leadership, and she, along with her focus on sustainable growth strategies, led to her current position as BlueNet's global head of sales and marketing. For those of you not in the language services industry, BlueNet is the go-to business management system for our industry. And Sophie, overseeing the business development team, drives results and supports people using her 15 years of international business experience. Sophie's a German native, but she calls New York home. I was just talking to her earlier about fall in New York, which she loves, and she delights in opportunities to travel the world and connect with audience, searching for the not-so-secret sauce of leadership, technology, and sales strategy success. So with that, I'd like to invite today's guest to join me on the screen. Sophie, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am. Thank you so much for having me and that introduction.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. And before we dive into our conversation, I'm so curious about what the audience thinks about leadership. So let's see if we can see some of the responses to the mentee. Okay, so we asked the audience, what word comes to mind when you think of leadership? And you can see this changing here. Okay, people, team, vision, intelligence, guidance. I love all these. I don't see the word boss in there. Do you, Sophie?
No. I also don't see power, so I'm glad to see that.
Yeah, we don't see power. We don't see boss. These are all great for our conversation. And I really want to thank the audience for diving into that first mentee. That's going to continue to change, and we might check in on it later. But Sophie, we've only got you for a limited time. I know you're a very busy person, and also you like to go to the office, so we don't want to keep you at the office too long. So let's dive into some of these questions. Sophie, tell me, what drove you to pursue your career in your field?
Yes, as you already mentioned, I started my career at Subway Corporate, which, yeah, is always a good conversation starter. I can already answer the questions. I have made a lot of Subway sandwiches in my life. Yes, lots of restaurant time was part of it, even though I had an office job in the end. But yeah, Subway was actually what drove me in my current career because of two major milestones. One was it's an American company, so I worked for them in Germany. So I was part of the development in the German market, which was basically my first dive into the globalization world because I saw how an American company was trying to enter a German market, was behaving on the German market. And I saw a lot of things that worked well and also a lot of mistakes where I realized that the American company didn't really understand the German culture, which is quite different, especially when it comes to food. And yeah, it also brought me to the US. Subway is headquartered in Milford, Connecticut. And my first business trip to the US got me to New York and made me fall in love with the city, but also the country, actually, on my first trip here.
That's so interesting. When we talked before this event today, I shared with you that I had kind of a similar experience. I worked for a multinational company here in the US before I got into language services, and that company was headquartered in Chile. So I worked for them here in the US and then ultimately moved to Chile for 2.5 years before coming back to the US. That is, I would say, a transformational experience to live and work in a country that's not your own. And I think in language services, sometimes, I don't know, I think it's common in our industry because we're dealing with language and culture all day long, every day. But people that aren't in our industry may not realize how fundamentally transformational living and working in another country is. Would you agree with that, Sophie?
Yeah, 100%. It's almost like something I wish we could require for everybody because I think it makes you a better person. It's also a humbling experience. You realize you don't know everything. You get to a new culture. You don't know the language 100%. I always have to think about like when I signed my first lease in America in English and realized, oh God, I'm signing a legal document now that is not in my native language. And yeah, you have to learn so much, and it's super fun, but it's a real challenge as well.
Yeah, if we've got any folks in the audience that are earlier in their career, any opportunity that you might have that enables you to go and experience a new culture and live in a new place, it teaches you some invaluable lessons. So I think we're already touching on some amazing takeaways here. That if that opportunity presents itself, take it, and you can even drive that as well for those of you in the audience that are early in your careers. If you see that opportunity, I am certainly a huge advocate of that, and I know Sophie is as well. So take advantage of it if it presents itself. Now, you mentioned milestones in your answer, Sophie. Can you highlight some key milestones in your career journey?
Yes, for sure. I mean, I already said Subway brought me to the US. I feel like moving to the US was one of the most pivotal milestones in my career because I realized how different people were approaching business here. And I didn't really want to come to the US. I worked for an American company, and it wasn't like always a dream of mine. But especially because I saw so many things that I thought America was doing wrong in Germany. My favorite example is always the chips that always went bad in the stores because Germans don't eat chips with their sandwich for lunch. We eat chips on the sofa, like when we watch TV, but it's not like a lunch thing for us. And we also don't put ice in our drinks. So the chips were going bad, the ice machines were breaking all the time, and I thought, why don't they get it? Then I moved to the US, and all of a sudden everything made sense. I totally understood all the reasonings behind it, and also why in the US nobody understood why we wouldn't put any ice in our drinks. I now do that as well.
Yeah.
So I'm on the other side now. But I also learned so many other things about the US. People are very open. In Europe, we sometimes think it's superficial, but I learned to understand that Americans are just way better at networking, and there is just this feeling of helping other people, kind of cheerleading other people's success that I didn't know from my career in Germany. And I love that. I love meeting so many people and kind of networking without an agenda. But then over the years, realizing that pretty much every single person I have met down the road really, really helped me in my career going forward. And it's something I also really like to give back. I think it's a great thing that I learned here. So that has really changed, yeah, my outlook for sure.
So, folks in the audience, if you didn't pick up on a couple of the key points that Sophie is making here, maybe I can emphasize them or highlight them. I think what you said about networking and that every relationship that you had ultimately had an impact in some way. Maybe it was sooner, maybe it was further down the line, but anybody who's listening today, networking is critically important. And I love what you said about no expectation of anything in return. Sometimes that's hard to do. But it's easy to see through, right? You can, when you're networking, and I've seen you in a conference setting, and I know you to be a master networker. But talk more about this concept of no expectation of anything in return when you're networking. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it needs to be authentic. I was also just at a conference, and I know how it is in sales, right? You kind of have to hit your numbers. But if somebody comes up to you with their business card and give you kind of their sales pitch, you usually don't really want to talk to that person any longer. And also, you don't just network for the next sale. I also think you network for your life and your career. I make a lot of friends in the industry that I don't necessarily ever will have a business relationship with, but they help me in other ways. And it's just cool to learn from people. And I think it's also great to have a network of people who do different things. And network with a lot of business owners. And I love that I can tap into those mentors now that run a business and can help me with a lot of decisions because they know how it is to run a business. So yeah, just creating that network, being interested in other people. People are so interesting. I mean, everybody has a story to tell. So I think, that's what I would.
That's the word authenticity is a huge takeaway here, because inauthenticity is something that you can easily see in someone else. And I think that we've all been challenged at one point or another in our career by, hey, I'm here, I'm in a sales role, or I have some goals and things that I need to meet. And I know that I've fallen into this where you just want to get some results and you want them quickly. But I love what you said about, these things take time to develop, and being authentic and truly wanting to help others. I've heard it said that if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll ultimately get what you want. Would you agree to that, Sophie?
Oh yeah, 100%. I saw my colleague once helping somebody. They forgot their network cable, and he just made sure they got their laptop charged. And a couple of years later, if they're looking for a tool, they might remember that person that helped them get that laptop. And yeah, if you do it without expecting anything back, I think those usually have the most impact.
Awesome. That's worth the price of admissions, folks. Already we've had some great takeaways here. So let's move on to another topic related to your path to success. We talked initially about your personal journey and your career beginnings. And by the way, I'm happy to learn that you have made plenty of Subway sandwiches in your career. Super cool. Not everybody gets to do that. But your path to success, could you share a pivotal moment in your career that you think significantly influenced that path?
Yes. Apart from that big move, I think when I moved from being an individual contributor into the leadership role, and I've gone in and out. I started a leadership role quite early in my Sakwe days already. Don't think I was ready for that now looking back. Not sure if they made a good choice there. But I think for me, it was a huge change from being an individual contributor where it's all about me. It's about my accomplishments. I had a lot of control over my output as well. I knew exactly what I put in comes out. And then when all of a sudden you're responsible for a team, you lose a lot of that control. And it really changed my view on my career, on my job. So that completely changed it. It was less about my own success and more about my team's success.
Yeah.
So I think that was also a really big one.
That's an interesting concept that I think we need to unpack it a little bit. This concept of being an individual contributor versus being a leader. And personally, I'd like to add that I think being a great individual contributor, and I think that you'll probably agree to this, that's a great career move in and of itself. And you can be a leading individual contributor by setting an example. Don't you think, Sophie?
Yes, 100%. I think it's probably the biggest mistake a lot of leaders and a lot of companies are doing, that their only career path is leadership, even though so little people actually qualify for leadership roles. And I think historically, and we made the same mistakes at BlueNet as well, where it's the person who's in the position the longest or is the best at that particular job, but that doesn't mean that they are well equipped to go into a leadership role. So I think sometimes we approach it a little from a wrong angle. And I think it's important that businesses also offer career paths for people who are great individual contributors, but either not interested in a leadership role, not everybody is, or just not qualified. Not everybody needs to go into leadership just to advance.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be like for that individual, it shouldn't be like, wow, I'm not, just because you're not best suited to lead other people doesn't mean you can't be great at whatever it is you do. And I love what you said about companies need to acknowledge those individual contributors and create a path of success for them as well. So that's a great insight. Sophie, what are some of the most valuable lessons that you've learned through your career that you believe have been instrumental in your achievements?
Oh God, so many. I think
Here, so try.
I know where to start. What I already mentioned was the networking. I did definitely learn. I take every opportunity to visit a customer or connect with somebody I've met. I have met people at conferences who said, "Hey, if you're ever in Spain, come visit me." And then I was in Spain. I'm like, "Hey, remember your offer?" And made really, really great connections this way. I really do think that's a lesson I want to give to everybody. And the other one for sure is that your career path doesn't always have to go up. I made a lot of stops and steps back, and yeah, because I really knew what I wanted. I wanted to be in New York, and I wanted that specific career working for a German company. But that took me a lot of work, and I had like a lot of setbacks. And I think the most important thing is that when they happen, that you don't think you're failing. I would always say give yourself a deadline. But I was actually in a moment where I found myself back in Germany. I had 4 job offers, but nobody could sponsor my visa. I had to move back to my parents. I didn't have any savings anymore. I had a master's degree. I had so much work experience, and I had to wait tables again. And I remember just like putting the apron back on and being like, how? Like, why? Like, I left the sandwich world so many times over, and yeah, I was back there. But it was all worth it in the end. And it just, yeah, I feel like if your career goes a little bit like this, if you, I don't know, get this amazing opportunity to start with a startup and get equity, but maybe you have to take like a pay cut and have to move back with roommates. Like, it's not a step back if you know what you want and where you're going. So I really think that's, yeah, one of my biggest takeaways. When I look back, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, there was so many times when I didn't have any savings anymore, but those you can always refill again. There's enough money to be made.
It's such great comments. And before I unpack that a little bit, I just want to remind the audience, please engage with us and send us questions in the chat. We want to hear from you. We're talking to Sophie Halbenstein, who's an amazing leader at Plunet, and she's got great insights. So please leave your questions in the chat. Sophie, I think what you said is amazing about your career not always being a direct path upward. I mean, sometimes it goes to the side, sometimes it might go down or back. And for folks not to be overly concerned about that. Also, I love what you said about having a really cool shirt the other day. So on the front, it said, goals are dreams with deadlines. So everybody out there, I'm sure we're probably talking to a lot of goals setters out there. You got to put those deadlines. But what you said about not always going straight forward, that resonates with me too, because when I left the US market to go and work in Chile, a lot of my, let's say, peers, they continue to progress in their careers here in the States. And there were times where I felt like, wow, was it a good decision for me to leave the US market and go and work in Chile? And obviously it turned out great, but there were definitely times where I felt like, was I making the right move? So I think self-doubt is also something that you just can't avoid cropping in or creeping into your thought process as you're going through your career. Awesome. I'm seeing some questions pop up in the chat here, so that's great. I want to move on now to more of some inspirational type conversation. And I wonder, Sophie, if you were to be able to give some advice to leaders who were, or people that weren't yet in leadership but aspiring to be in leadership, what advice would you give to those that are just starting their careers?
Yeah, I already said it in the very beginning when I saw what everybody put in. So I feel like we already have a very advanced audience. But I think my biggest advice is if you want to go into leadership because you aspire to be in a position of power, or you think you will have you can make a lot of decisions, you're being controlled. You might not be in the right spot. You will probably get humbled quite easily, and or you're just going to be terrible at your job. One of those two. I think it's very this old school thing of leadership where a lot of people just think yeah, then I can call the shots. Like, I want to be the boss, so I can make decisions. I think it's actually the opposite. I think it really humbles you. You have less control over your schedule. You have to be there for people all the time. So I really think that's a very, very important thing that people need to know. And then also, if you're just starting out, or if you're already a leader, either case, I really think working on yourself is probably always the best advice, because leadership will test you. You will have conflicts. I already saw a question about conflict in the chat, but it's really, really important that you know your own trigger points, that you can look at a conflict, without being being influenced by maybe like your own feelings and emotions. So all of the investment, if it's coaching, if it's therapy, if it's having a mentor, just really like working on yourself. Books, I think, are also always like a great resource. I really challenge people always to work on themselves first before they think they can take the responsibility to lead other people.
I think what you said about going into leadership for the right reasons, that's critically important. If all you want to do is make decisions and be the boss, be in control, be in a position of power, I think what Sophie said, that you're just, let's be frank about it, you're not going to be good at your job if that's the reason you want to be in leadership. And a lot of I was listening to some of the nuances in your response, and I pulled out this what you said about losing control. When you think about leadership, that can be counterintuitive. Like, okay, leadership and loss of control. But how does that might not on the surface make sense, but it makes total sense, because you are counting on a team of people to perform. Whereas when you were operating as an individual contributor, you had control over your universe of responsibility. But when you are in leadership, you sort of jettison that control and distribute it amongst your team. So that's a counterintuitive thought that I think the audience could benefit from, is to understand that, first of all, leadership is not about control or being powerful. And also, leadership can be a loss of control rather than a gain of control. So really great insight, Sophie. All right. Now, this is probably the most important, I think, for the audience, this next section that we're going to get into about challenges in the future. And I know, at least in our industry, and probably every industry that anybody works in that's watching this show right now, the future is something that we read about every single day. We're being hit in the head with this AI phenomenon, and it's just something, I think we're all fatigued from it, frankly, but we do have to think about challenges in the future all the time. How are we going to continue to perform? How are we going to make our organization succeed in the face or in the context of this changing environment that we find ourselves in? And I'd be interested in your thoughts on this challenge. Like, what do you think was your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, I already started telling that story. I think my biggest failure was really not getting my visa renewed in the beginning of my career, and moving back to Germany, moving back with my parents, depleting all of my savings, and just really starting from zero again. And I feel like I had a similar feeling that you had when comparing myself to my peers, because all of my friends already were very advanced in their careers. I wasn't 18 anymore, so my friends some could already like put deposits down for houses or like apartments, and I was still holding on to that dream of moving back to New York so much. And I remember the way people started looking at me with like worry. And I had always been a good student. I've always done the very rational thing. So for the first time, I could see people thought I had lost my mind, quite frankly. Like, people had interventions with me, and they were like sitting me down, and they were like, Sophie, like, you have a European passport, you can move anywhere. Like, why are you holding on to this dream so much? And I just really really knew that that was the way I wanted to go. But yeah, I definitely felt like a failure. And again, like I never want my friends to ever look at me this way and talk to me in a way that made me feel like, yeah, they thought I lost it. And but again, like I gave myself a deadline, and I promised if I didn't make it, I think it was November, if I didn't get a job that could bring me back to New York until November, I would start applying in Europe. And yeah, I did sign my contract with Bluenet on November 1st. That's
Oh
no
my
joke. uh, yeah, it was really, and then started January 1st. But yeah, I think that's what I learned from it. Like, it's okay to fail, and it's totally fine to have those setbacks, but like I didn't give up. I applied everywhere. I drove to Berlin and knocked on Stefan's door and asked again if he could hire me at Bluenet, even though the first round of visa hadn't worked out. So and Kristen Gutierrez, she just had this amazing presentation at ASC, and she said the same. Like the action is so important. Like when you have a setback and a failure, like don't sit on your sofa and cry and eat ice cream. I mean, maybe for like a day, that's fine, but find relaxation in action. For me, it was just like this. Yeah, I went from one interview to the next, just yeah, keeping myself busy until the opportunity presented itself. And opportunities will always present yourself if you are active.
That's right. That's right. I think that the universe conspires to help you if you do your part, right?
Yes.
And I love what you said about a lot of people think it's a cliche that, don't give up, but it's not a cliche. It's reality. Giving up or not achieving what you thought was your goal and then sitting on the couch and just, wallowing in self-pity, that's not going to get you there. But knocking on doors and being willing to take a waiting job at a restaurant in the interim while you stacked things up in your favor to ultimately get that role. That's a great story. I think that will resonate with a lot of people. It certainly resonates with me. By the way, being a waiter or a waitress is a great job. Let's not minimize that, because you learn a lot about teamwork and adaptability and customer service. You can learn a lot by doing that job. So let's not minimize that job. But I'm super happy that it worked out for you and you ultimately got to go back to New York. Now, before we get into the audience questions, oh, wait a minute. I've got one other one that you alluded to before I get into the last question that we had planned for today. But many leaders, I mean, we talk about work-life balance all the time. And this is another cliche, right? You got to have balance. But you're a leader, you're living it, and you're learning from it every single day. And people could benefit from what you're thinking about when it comes to work-life balance. So, Sophie, share what your challenges are and how you solve this work-life balance question. How do you balance your professional and personal life effectively?
Yes, I'm still working on getting better at it. But I have a little bit of a cliche answer because I do think, I mean, you actually framed it perfectly, the balance between your professional and your personal life and not the work-life balance. Because for me, work is part of my life. So I actually really like how you framed it. And I do think it's super, super important that you like your job. You're doing it more than anything else on this planet. So really investing in your career, I think is important, and really asking yourself like the hard question: do I really like my job? Did I choose the right path? Not everybody loves a corporate career. I'm lucky enough that I love corporate world, but if you don't, I totally get it too. Maybe another job makes more sense. But for me, the most important thing is because I'm very bad at switching back and forth. So I have to have really clean cuts between my personal life and work, in the sense of I go to the office because I really like to have that space where I work and that space where my personal life takes place, which doesn't mean that we just had heavy rains in New York. I do sometimes work from home, but I do like that separation. And I also have a very, very strict, when I'm on vacation, I don't open my laptop rule, because unfortunately I don't have this ability to just answer an email quickly and then go back and drink my Aperol spritz. I'm the type of person, I get stuck, and it's very annoying for the people around me. So I need to completely shut off, basically. So if your job allows that, I mean, of course, my team knows, if anything, they can contact me via phone. But it also actually has a positive effect of making sure when I'm gone, I have everything well allocated, so people know what to do. But yeah, for me, that's extremely important. But I also have friends who are great at taking their laptop on a long weekend, answer a few emails, and then come back to happy hour and or breakfast without an issue. I cannot do it. Some people also say, I rather read my Slack on vacation, so I don't come back to 1,000 emails and 1,000 notifications. Also totally get it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for me, so I have to shut off and then come back to 1,000 emails. And but that's the price I'm willing to pay.
Yeah, I think what I'm gleaning from your comments, Sophie, is that this is an individual phenomenon. Like how you manage your personal life and your professional life, and you balance those two things. It can mean very different things for different people, right? You're sitting in an office. I'm sitting in my home office. And my wife loves to go to the office like you do, and have a very clean line between personal time and professional time. I'm one of those people that you described that can check into an email while I'm on vacation and then check back into the fun. Although there's a point of diminishing returns there, and I have to be cognizant of that. So I think the lesson here for everybody out there is to figure out what works for you. This has been written about constantly. If you read the Wall Street Journal, they have a lot of articles about this. I remember reading one recently, Sophie, where there's this battle right now with companies wanting people to come back to the office and people resisting coming back to the office. And some companies, I won't mention any names, resorting to things like counting the badge swipes to get into the office, or putting weight sensors in office chairs to know how long people have been sitting in them. And I think if I could just share one personal comment about this, is that, in my opinion, those strategies are not going to lead to success. I think if you work in a professional sphere, let professionals be professionals and do your job as a leader, and incorporate metrics into people's work so that you have things that you can see whether or not somebody's accomplishing their goals or not. Set up internal accounting or holding people accountable, putting those systems in place. I don't think we need weight sensors in seats. Do you think so, Sophie?
No, definitely not. And I feel like everybody agrees that working from home and not working is not acceptable.
Right.
But also, I'm like, it's also not acceptable not to work at an office. And there's something wrong with your goals or the way your job is set up if you cannot tell. If you need a weight sensor to see if somebody's there.
Yeah. I think that there might be some challenges associated with scale when companies get so big that they might resort to some of those tactics. But I still think that, to the extent that you are sophisticated, you ought to be good at implementing mechanisms that enable you not to have to count badge swipes, let's say. Anyway, that's a huge topic. We could occupy an entire live event just on that one. Maybe we will in the future. One last question, Sophie, before we get into some of the audience questions. And by the way, folks, please remember to send us questions in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Got a great leader on the show today that has a lot of wonderful insights. Okay, Sophie, here's the big one. It's gonna cause you to really dig deep into your experience. What does success mean to you?
Oh, wow, that's almost philosophical, but it is thankfully one I think about a lot, and it's also something I think that I constantly adjust. The most important part for me, and I know it sounds maybe a little cliche, but it's definitely true for me. The most important thing is happiness. I just want to be happy, and I know that doesn't mean you have everything is all smiles every day, but the joy in what I do and just being truly happy is extremely important, and that means my success needs to be part of that. That means, for example, I couldn't be happy in a job where I'm successful only financially, but I wouldn't like the job, for example. But there is definitely still like a financial component to it. I would never, I mean, I studied finance, so you can tell that money definitely was part of my decisions in my career. I think for me, it's like I need to be able to afford everything that I want, and that's important for me, and that is success for me. And that's different for everybody. I love talking to my friends about it, where they're like financial success, how they define it, because it's so different. I have friends who are like, I really don't care as long as I can pay rent and food. That's fine. I don't need to travel the world. I don't need an expensive watch or clothes. And I have other friends, they look at me and they cannot believe how little my financial goal is, because for them it's the millions. And I think everything is fair. You just need to know where that is. I had this moment in my life, in my early career, where my friend got married in Germany and I couldn't afford flying home to the wedding because it was in vacation time, and I had to tap really, really deep into my emergency savings to do it. And that was one thing where I said, I always want to be able to attend every event around the world that my friends, it doesn't need to be a wedding, could be any life event. But if I want to go, I never want being able to afford it to stop me. So that is for me like my financial success standard that I need. And then, yeah, the joy component now also extends to my team. Talking about losing control. Before it was just me liking my job, being happy in my job. Now I also want my team to be happy. If they're not, then I also don't think I succeed. And then there's also a part of recognition. Being recognized within your team, within your organization, but also within your industry is super important. I mean, honestly, being here today on episode 1 is such a good example of something that really falls into my definition of success, and makes me, really, really grateful. Because there's some people who say I want to be successful, without anybody knowing. And I also respect that a lot. I think that's super cool. But I'm not one of those people. I like the recognition as well. I like to, I don't know, throw a big Flunet summit and like people, telling us that they're happy. So yeah, those are my 3 things.
I love it. I love what you said about that. And you shouldn't be shy about saying that, hey, I want to have enough financial means to do the things that I want. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And if you have champagne tastes, then you're going to do what it takes to achieve the being able to buy the champagne. Obviously, you have achieved that. I definitely want to acknowledge you as, I mean, you're the first person that we thought of having you as kicking off this series on leadership. So a lot of people know that you're an amazing leader, Sophie. I also loved what you said about if your team is not happy or successful, then you're not going to feel happy or successful as well. And that word happy and joyful it can mean a lot of different things to different people. For me personally, Sophie, I sometimes I have to reconcile or think about, hey, you and we're in the language services industry. You're in the technology side of the language services industry, and we're in the services side of the language services industry. And at the end of the day, those things are vehicles to achieve the things that we want. But what really makes me happy, and knowing you probably makes you happy as well, is that it's not so much about the vehicle as it is the people that are helping drive that train, the customers, the people that you work with, your partners, your network, all of those things. If you shift your mindset to focusing on those people, you're going to achieve the success, or you have a much higher likelihood of achieving the success that you want in life. But for me, I think that happiness and joy is derived not so much from whatever it is you're selling or whatever job you find yourself in. I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there that find debits and credits in accounting their lot in life, and that's probably not a source of tremendous joy for them. But the people that they work with, the customers that they help along the way by doing those things, that's where the joy comes from. So it's a matter of mindset. Wouldn't you agree, Sophie?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's also where the recognition part comes in, because if you don't know that you made your clients happy or that you solved the issue, you also cannot have this feel of success. So yeah, I totally agree. I think everybody would probably agree nothing feels better than having solved a problem for somebody. So yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for going through those questions with us. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to transition to a super fun part of the show where we check in with the audience. And by the way, audience, you still have time to send us some questions. And here's one already that just popped up. How do you foster a culture of innovation and continuous improvement within your team? Great question.
Amazing question. We actually spoke about that a lot on our management offsite as well, because I feel like every company wants it, but what it actually means is that you have to have a culture where people can fail. And also, I know that's a little bit of a, cliche, but you have to really, really be okay with people trying something, doing something that might have not asked you, take initiatives, and then if it doesn't work out well, I think your reaction is the most important. So I really try to see when my team is taking a risk. I have some people on my team who are amazing at that, who are just like, yeah, I prepared this or I tried this out and it didn't work out. But you have to celebrate those things as well and be like, I'm so glad you did that. That's amazing. And now we can check it off our list and know that we have tried. But if people try something for your business and have good intentions, I think it's very important to be gracious with failure. And it's easier said than done when somebody all of a sudden wastes resources or tries something and creates some chaos with the client. But yeah, that's the one thing for me.
Yeah.
It's just like, it might have not worked out.
Yeah. That's a huge one. If people don't feel comfortable or feel vulnerable to losing, I don't know, position or respect within the organization because they failed, I don't think that you're going to have a culture of innovation or of continuous improvement in your organization, because people are not going to want to try stuff. I also like what you said, because I think it's healthy that, when you do try things, you're expending resources. And so we're going to hit on this balance word again, but I think that you have to find this fine balance, and it's different for every company. Some companies have lots and lots of resources. Some companies don't have as much. So your degree of acceptance of failure has to be in line with the extent to which you can use resources in those failures. So that's a great point that you made, and a great insight that failure and resources, that balance has to come into play when you're trying to develop that culture. Great answer. Thank you, Sophie. Here's another question from the audience. How do you handle conflicts within your team or organization? Wow, this one can be tough.
I know. Yes. We never have any. No, I'm just kidding. This is the hardest part for me, and I think it's the hardest part of leadership because conflicts always happen. And I think for me, the most important thing is if somebody comes to me with a conflict, it's always, do you just want to vent about this right now? Or do you just want me to know, or do you want me to take action? Because sometimes I also think it's important if people just notify you about a conflict, because it's one thing if somebody has a conflict or if 5 people have the same conflict with the same person. And sometimes things can also, blow over after a good night's sleep. So my first question is always, do you just want me to acknowledge that, write it down, have it in my mental record, or do you want me to take action? And if it's something where action needs to be taken, I always prefer, of course, 2 people who are in the conflict to speak just one-on-one before one person from the leadership team comes in. But I always give the option. Do you want to try solve it on your own? Or do you want me to be there? Or do you want to try to solve it on your own? If you cannot solve it, then bring me in. And then, of course, HR is the last step. But I feel like all of these different steps need to be there. And again, I think the most important is sometimes people don't like to speak about conflict because they're scared the manager will immediately take action, like run to that other person and talk to them. And sometimes it's just like, it's good for me to know I'm not going to do anything. But if it comes up again or with a different person, then action might need to be taken.
Interesting. Yeah, this is a minefield, right? I mean, very, very difficult as a leader. What I liked about what you said is that you didn't explicitly say it, but you included it in your comments, that I think that there's a role to be played by the person involved in the conflict. Like, for example, as a leader, typically, I'm sure you would probably agree that people on your team, conflict is normal. Challenges are normal. Things that aren't working right are normal. But in general, leaders like to be brought solutions rather than problems. And if you're involved in a conflict with someone, there is a role for you to play in that conflict, maybe before that conflict comes to your attention. Like, hey, Sophie, I've had this conflict with this individual or this situation. Here's what I have done to try and solve this problem, but it persists. And I wanted you to know. But not so much, hey, Sophie, I've got this problem. Like, what do you want me to do with that? Do you think that that's your preferred way of receiving notification of a conflict, that the individual or individuals have at least tried to solve it on their own, or tried something to try to advance the problem rather than just presenting with it to you and dumping it in your lap? What would you say?
Yeah, I actually think most people probably, before they come to me, have already put some effort into it. But I can also see people just being very overwhelmed with a conflict. Like, I realize that a lot of people are very bad at conflict, and myself included. I mean, conflict, nobody likes it, and not everybody has the bravery of like openly going into conflict. But yeah, I think it's super important for leaders that they don't action on it too soon without also consent of the other person. And then my last thing is also I have a very low tolerance for conflict in general. So if somebody is really like a problem and I see a pattern, it's something I just don't, yeah, I don't watch like in the long term. I think people need to fit in the team. I think that's more important than just how well people perform. And even a high performer, I think that like the studies even say like a toxic employee can do like 4 times more damage than adding a good person. So when you have like these numbers in your mind and you feel like, okay, this toxic person is canceling out 4 of my high performers, it's like, it's just not good. So of course, conflicts happen with everybody, even with the nicest people. But yeah, if I see a pattern, for me, that has no place in the team.
Yeah, no, great insight, and I agree with your comments 100%. And I think that you're right. I mean, toxic individuals in an organization are just that, and you have to, as a leader, figure out the best way to deal with that. Okay, this is going to be the last question from the audience. We thank you so much for sending these questions. And we're going to be wrapping up here soon, but we've got one other thing that we got to do before we leave. So don't check out just yet. That is going to involve you. So, Sophie, what leadership qualities do you believe have been most instrumental in your success?
Oh my God. I mean, I think what brought me here is different from actually what makes me succeed. I think I'm very confident, and I think that's kind of why I succeeded in my career, basically like externally, even though I don't think that's actually a necessary leadership quality. I think it's almost like a wrong reason to promote somebody.
Right.
But what I think one of the things I really like is always knowing why I'm doing something. I have very, very clear goals. I always have a clear mission for everything I do, except for when I network, then I don't have an agenda. And I do like to share that with my team as well. I don't like to be like, hey, this is what we're doing, or like making decisions. I like to really always share the why. Like, I don't know, why are we having this event, or like why are we sharing this with the client when I put like standard operating procedures together. And I think this quality is actually probably helping me the most. Also, somebody was asking about inspiring. I'm not sure if I'm super inspiring, but I feel like my team knows always why we're doing things for. And I think that's very motivating when the team knows, like, I'm not just doing these cold calls or these emails, I know exactly why.
Yeah, awesome. What is your why? And I love what you said about the difference between confidence and competence. A lot of times that can be, confidence can masquerade as competence. And there is a very important difference. And we should be, there's nothing wrong with confidence. Confidence can take you a long way in life, but that competence factor needs to come in at some point. So, Sophie, you are inspiring. This has been an amazing conversation. I've loved every minute of it. And my mood right now is like, man, I want to go tackle the world because you've given me so much inspiration. And I want to check in with the audience. What is your mood right now, audience? So scan that QR code and let us know what you think. And Sophie, as they're doing that, I just want to once again thank you and remind everyone that Sophie works at Bluenet. She is I want to get your title exactly right, Sophie. I know you're in charge of a lot of people there. You go ahead. Yeah, global head of marketing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Global head of sales and marketing. If you're in the language services industry, you will probably see Sophie at a conference near you before too long. And obviously, she is amazing to know. And if you're not a PlueNet user, you should be. My company is, and we have been for a long time, and they're constantly making amazing updates, and they have amazing leaders like Sophie. So do yourself a favor and improve your business by using PlueNet software. Do we have some results on the post-event mood? Let's see. All right. There we go. I can't even read that. That's so small. Can you see that, Sophie?
I can see ready to lead the world. That's amazing.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. I want to thank the audience, and please follow Sophie, follow me on social media. And I just want to thank you once again, Sophie. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for having me, and also the great questions from the audience. This is really, really cool to see. I feel like now I need to answer these for myself as well after this event. Really, really great being here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we're going to sign off. Have a great rest of your day, Sophie. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.